A new Gen Z survey has sent shockwaves on the internet. It shows that almost one-third of Gen Z men think women should obey their husbands. A lot of people are angry about it. Here's a quick taste of how people have responded to the survey on social media.
Incel culture needs to be stigmatized more. This isn't the male loneliness epidemic. It's a misogyny epidemic. We should normalize calling out bigotry and educating men who think this way.
Good luck finding a girlfriend.
The kids indeed are not all right.
So today, on International Women's Day, we are going to talk about this with one of the authors of the survey. What do Gen Z men think? Why do they think that? And why should we all be worried about it?
And surprisingly, of all the different kind of groups in terms of age, generation, and gender, the Gen Z, the Zennials, if you want, men are quite conservative, almost stands out in comparison to, well, women who are generally more progressive in all accounts, but even also the older generation of men. It is concerning, but it also makes me very sad.
Professor Hee-Jung Chung is the director of King's Global Institute for Women's Leadership. The survey was a joint project between her institute and Ipsos, a market research firm. It was designed to understand how adults, both men and women, perceive gender roles and gender equality in 2026.
So we've conducted a survey across more than 23,000 individuals across 29 countries. So these countries include countries like the US, UK, Australia, like Germany, but also we have countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Korea, Japan, etc. So a wide range of countries across the globe. And we asked individuals between age 18 to 75, both men and women, a representative of the population, if you want. And every year we conduct a survey of how do people feel about gender equality today? Do you think we have achieved gender equality? If not, which aspects haven't we achieved? But also this year, we want to really focus on what it means to be a man and a woman, because there has been a lot of concerns around this whole trad wifeism, or that men kind of becoming these alpha, more dominant forms of masculinity. So we wanted to really test out some of these, if you want, these kind of rhetoric or myths that has been going around in a lot of kind of social media and media. And yeah, we found a whole range of very interesting outcomes.
This proved to be the most controversial question. People in 29 countries were asked whether a wife should always obey her husband. 31%, or almost one-third of Gen Z men, said yes. Compare that with older men or baby boomers to the left, only 13% of them agreed with the statement. And women in general were far less likely to agree.
Gen Z men, on many accounts, if you ask them like on very specifically on certain things, they are also saying gender roles need to be renegotiated. However, they're the ones that not only do they say they are personally very traditional, but they also perceive the world to be very traditional. So it's really kind of shocking to see how that they really stand out in terms of the population.
Let's take a look at some of the other results that have to do with how men and women perceive gender roles. For instance, when asked if a husband should have the final word on important decisions made in his home, one-third of all Gen Z men agreed. That's double the amount of boomer male. Only 17% of male baby boomers think so. Or let's take sex. 21% of Gen Z men think a real woman should never initiate sex. That's 1 in 5 men between the ages of 18 and 29 who believe that.
There's a whole range of ways of trying to interpret what this means and why Gen Z men really stand out in terms of the traditional gender roles. One thing is about the current kind of rhetoric, but also kind of influencers, social media influencers, but also a lot of political leaders who are now really capitalizing on a lot of young men's grievances around being kind of lost in terms of what it means to be a man, and saying, actually, we need to go back to the traditional ways of being. And then they bring in like issues around biology. It's like men need to be the dominant. That's what women want, etc. Which, again, is not what the rest of the population thinks.
Professor Chung also says young women are full of fear because the manifestation of these attitudes plays out where these women study, work, and spend their time on a daily basis.
I've been teaching young people, like, 18 to 21-year-olds for a very, very long time, for more than 2 decades. And I think the last few years have really been the time where, so the module I teach is mostly young women. And they are really afraid. They're just like, what is happening to our male peers? I mean, like, we would like to love them and we would love to be partnering up with them, but then they seem to be, kind of being, led astray by these social media influencers with their views of what women should be like, but also what men should be like, which isn't what women want. But those influencers are telling them, like, this is what women actually want, which is completely ludicrous, because our data shows that gender role attitudes are absolutely polar opposite when it comes to Gen Zs, right? And I just want to tell young men, like, stop putting yourselves in these man boxes.
In this survey, men were also asked to gauge how well they think the fight for gender equality is going. For instance, would things work better if more women held positions of power? Have we gone so far in promoting women's equality that we are discriminating against men? And are men being expected to do too much to support equality? Almost 60% of Gen Z men think that men are being expected to do too much. This, when the United Nations tells us that women and girls have just 64% of the legal rights of men globally. In their words, women are turned away, not believed, re-victimized, or priced out of legal support. Equality never arrives. Even here in the European Union, women have to work over 15 months to earn what men do in 1 year. I asked Professor Chung what she would say to Gen Z men on International Women's Day, because the fight for gender equality is their fight too.
They feel uncared for. They feel very scared. And I hear your grievances, but you're looking at the wrong people to blame. It's not women. It's not migrants. You need to be able to fight together with young women for a better society. And maybe through renegotiating gender roles, but also just asking for more from your government, from your companies, in regards to better work-life balance, better pay, better working conditions. And it's not just, we're giving it to women. No, we're giving it to both, like, men and women and other genders. And this is a moment that young people need to come together and fight collectively rather than each other. We, as women in International Women's Day about gender equality, we can't have this conversation without men. It is in a point where, like, we can't just be celebrating women on its own, because without men and men's gender roles changing, there's a limit of how much change and gender equality we could actually achieve.